Hello, beautiful people. Good evening. It's so wonderful to be here, honestly. I think this is my third time being in Lagos, and the rain welcomed me. Of course, there's the little thing about Nigerian airlines that wanted to frustrate me, but and it's a homecoming for me because this is Liberation Alliance Africa, and I used to be an associate here. So it's so wonderful to be seated. This is the first time I'm meeting Toby, by the way. And then seeing Omolara again, I couldn't stop hugging her. So it's really wonderful to be here. So welcome everyone. And we're going to do this together. I want us to have like a conversation and just be free with each other because we're really talking about, yes, there's the academic sound of it, which is something I admire Omolara for, by the way. So what we're trying to discuss today, what we're trying to talk about today is that we know what is happening around the world. We know what's happening in Nigeria. We see the issues, we see the inequalities, we have the fears, the confusion, the anger. But what are we doing with it? And how do we go from knowing what is happening to taking action, basically? And because, by the way, how many of us studied history in school? So you see, we had social studies, I think. Yes. And what they taught us was like, I mean, they told us Fumila Ransom Kuti was the first woman to drive a car. Imagine to drive a car. I didn't know who Sarah Bagambo was till like maybe a decade ago. These were women who did a lot of good work, who organized. Our history is one of organizing, even from the time of Nana Asmao, the daughter of Fodio. I don't want to get into, but she did start making sure that women were educated in northern Nigeria. She went house to house, had followers, traveled through that landscape, which still at that time was riddled with banditry and terrorism. But women, Nigerian women have been organizing, Nigerian people have been resisting. And I guess that's where I'm going to start the conversation for us. I'm going to start by asking the both of you to share, if you could go back in hindsight and think, when did it click that, oh, this is the time for me, I started to recognize that the world is a bit uneven. This was a time where I developed anger, righteous anger. I call anger righteous, by the way. When was that for you both?
Question, Nana. When was it not? But I think I came to the consciousness for me when I always did it back because I did my national diploma at Yaba Tech and I was like 17 when I got in. And before that time, I would just read books. I would read novels and all of that. But the being conscious and being aware of the inequalities was when I was in Yaba Tech, when our first class, and I would just in the pool of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Nigerian, polytechnic, particularly where a class is almost 200 people, and it was just that room, and it was our first class together. We didn't even know what we were going to do, and the senior ND2 folks came and they said, oh, you have to choose a class rep for each course and then for course rep and all of that. And I just came up and said, oh, I will be a course rep for economics. And I was very tiny. I know I look big now, but I was very tiny then. But I just wanted to lead. I liked leading, right? And this was 150 plus people. It's a good time to be in charge, and I just said I will be the course rep, and the kind of confusion that was on their faces, and I'm like, am I missing something? And at first I thought maybe because we were new, but I didn't realize we are all new, right? And just really noticing the different reactions from people. And I went on to become the course rep of this very lovely man that passed me, still rests well. And the way he visibilized me, you know, all of those dramatic lecturers that before they even entered the room, they say, where is my Toby? So he visibilized me so much. And a lot of times, Toby is also very masculine in Yoruba culture. So when he talks about Toby, people just assume that Toby is a man. So when you are a girl, not even a woman, you're a girl. At least upgrade me small. But they're always very shocked. You're a girl. And but that stayed with me for a while. And my friends back then, I would always ask them, but do you not see this as a weird thing and all? And then I found my way into a space where they were talking about human rights. And it made sense to me, right? And I think that has always been it. I've never not known a day where something has not happened and I will not think about how messed up the world is. I think from that time when I became just really conscious of it, like it has always been something. If it's not a random guy at the market, it will be my mom misbehaving or a religious person doing some things. Like it's always something, right? And I think that's just really how I've been navigating. That is how I come into my work. That is how I come into even my private space, my friendship, like just bringing all of that into different rooms, the anger, the tension, the curiosity, the whatever. Yeah. So that's.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, and if you notice, presidents, class reps, male, assistant, secretary, yes, meant for, even now, VP, maybe.
Thank you. So, I think I would like to share the story of how I became aware of these systems of power as systems of power rather than relational questions, you know? Because when you're growing up and you experience maybe, for lack of a better word, gender inequalities, because I don't really believe in gender equality. You know, it's what I want is it's liberation that feels right. Is to live a habitable life that feels that nothing I need for my personal and collective flourishing is not out of reach. So those are kind of my dreams of liberation. So it's that really has nothing to do with like being able to be what that men have. Yeah, because I also know that oppression makes you a better thinker, better feeler, if you let it, right? So I guess the awakening that I would like to share is more about when I realized that all these systems were interconnected and they were not just a suggestion, they control every aspect of life. I'm going to give an example. And this is not to knock celebrities. Even when I become president of the entire universe, I will ban celebrity. That will be my first order of action. Then the next thing that will go is gym. Don't worry, I have a list. But when I realized that these systems are kind of hegemonies that punish dissent was my kind of awakening, because I'd been aware of, all of these things. In secondary school, I had experiences where there was this thing in school where, there was this little paramilitary thing where you shout, pray, Sean, and everybody bangs their feet. And that really excited me so much. I was like, I just want to be like pray, Sean, and the entire school goes, whoa. So, I was like really dreaming about that stuff. And so I kind of asked, can I do it? And they said, no, you can't do it. I was like, why? Because like, girl, I was like, what? My voice is loud. Like, I've got the material. And so I kind of hijacked the assembly. It was a Monday morning. I shouted pressure. I shouted pressure from the back. My sister is in the room because she was in that school. I suddenly hijacked the assembly and shouted pressure. And guess what? Everybody bangs their foot. I was in heaven. Then I was in punishment for 1 week. But, if let's say maybe about 15 or so years ago, I was working as a human rights lawyer. And I always make a joke that I've been a lawyer for, it's up to 15 years, like 12 years. Before then, I was a journalist. I was like, liberation should be somewhere. Let's find it. And so I always make a joke that as long as I've been a lawyer, if justice walked in this room right now, I don't recognize her. I've never seen that girl before. And I have gone from court to court. All the most you can get is placation. Oh, Priye, I felt that sigh in my heart. The most you will get is negotiation and stuff like that. So it started making me think about what human rights really are. Because I worked like in human rights for like I think 7 years, like officially as an NGOist, you know. And the only thing I learned at the time was that justice did not exist, and it's a farce, just like many of the structures that we abide by. And you would find out how harmful and how debilitating they can be if you try to deviate or build a life of your own or do things differently or explore. And so that kind of brought it kind of cemented those kind of little moments of awakening into understanding that, oh, we're not arguing with the boys in our class. We are arguing with systems and structures that build our entire world, that determine what meaning is. You know, when you talk about the aesthetics of oppression, it is what conveys meaning. I haven't had that in a while. Who remembers when phones just came to Nigeria? If your father is going to get a call 5 minutes time, your radio would have started winning. You know, and understanding that interconnectedness of how we are supposed to be oppressed but shut up about it, I think was what kind of blew the cover for me. And it actually made me leave sort of the NGO space because it wasn't like they don't know. No, it was like oh my God, can I find something that makes sense or something that feels like gives me agency and provides me with the ability to think thoroughly. Even if I cannot usurp the system, I can take myself out of it in ways that matter to me, because I don't see any of us really getting out like completely. And that is why Toni Morrison says that sometimes we only survive in parts, you know. And yeah, so I think the work of critical consciousness was the desire to survive in parts and in whole, and kind of be able to build a world of resilience, but also a world of resistance. And, you know, it might be kind of like easy way out, but that was why I chose kind of like inside. I was like, I can't control the world, but I can think about myself. I can think about myself as a person and think of others as people just like me and build that kind of internal resistance to systems that control us and exploit us. And just for honorary mention, IMF, World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions, WTO. Yes, because these systems appear as developmental structures, and a lot of us believed it and lived our life. You know, have you ever seen, you're trying to define something according to the World Bank?
Yeah.
According to the UN.
Yeah. To say how these systems are manifested in different ways even before we existed.
Yes.
Like I'm thinking about the Aba Women's Riot, for example. It was like a disruption to their own market organizing. They wanted to impose taxation.
Yeah.
Some
And you know,
random-
we're going to go into that, because what you're saying is it's really because really when you think about it, it's the system that produces all of the things that we see, all of the things that are wrong currently. And the more, if any one of us tries to even step a foot out, it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't give people the idea that they can get away from this. We're in this together. But no, we don't want to be in this. We are done with being in this because it's harmful to everyone. But like you started, Toby, and I think that you should continue, which is that there have been a lot of feminist movements. We might not have had the language for it at the time, but they are what they are. There were a lot of resistance, like the Aba Women riot you shared.
For example, that came to mind, and how 10,000 plus women existed. And I don't even think, because these women are market women, they have businesses, that means they have access to some money. So I don't think the tax in and of itself was the problem, or the request to pay more for things. It was just that the imposition of it was like a threat to them, to their bodies, to their lives, right? I was watching the biopic of Omolara Oriye, and one of the lines always stayed with me, and one of the market women was telling Omolara that in Yoruba that when Otunika Tumasan me, like she said it in such a way that, and that means that now you ask us to start paying for water. She said it so loosely and with such omi, like water. They want us to start paying for water. And this woman that knows like what water means to her, what water would do for our sexual and reproductive health, what water would do for our children, what water would do for our time, for our community, knows how imposing tax on that and putting a price on it, what it will, like even negotiating that price, what it will cost for our own body, because now we are hearing different cases of how women are negotiating water and access to clean water with their bodies, right? So it's from even there, like tracing all of that thread and seeing how the organizing back then wasn't just, oh, we are resisting capitalism. It's that women refused and protect, like they refused that power over, right? And that imposition of how dare these women, right? And even the about women riot, because we all know the issue, and if you don't know, please Google. The issue of about women riot, it wasn't that they were just walking around. It was an organized protest. They were naked. It was that serious, right? And when you trace that to the contemporary organizing now, you could also see that the Arawaminsu State of Emergency, GBV, they are all refusers to the threat on our bodies. Yep. They are all refusers to the threat of our safety, of our autonomy. It's not just because, oh, we have the luxury. I don't want to be going to secretariat every other day or in Kenya. We've done all of that. It's because we know that if they get away with one, they will get away with more. And if we don't keep resisting, it's of course normalized, but we have to keep, Toni Morrison in an interview was saying, I have to be shocked. Because if I'm not shocked, it will look as though it's a normal thing. So we have to be shocked. The way they were shocked, like, Potunika Masohomi, like, ow. We have to be shocked. And I think these women also, what I'm drawing again was that they didn't have funding. They didn't have any longitudinal framework or any of those things that now has structured our activism now. Before all of that came, it was just identifying those threats in different corners. The Egba market women did their own. The Margaret Echo time did their own. The Sawaba Gambo people did their in different contexts, identifying the threats. These girls are not going to school. What can we do to make sure that girls get into school? Identifying those threats and being able to organize collectively, because again, at that time, and I think that's something that we have to ask ourselves, like, what did these women have access to that we are struggling to have access to now? Because the threat to our bodies is not, it hasn't stopped. In fact, it has increased, right? But they organized. If they were able to walk those long walks and stay in, is it the Fumilayos that stay in Alake, in Abeokuta, the chief's palace, for days, and sat down there, stripped themselves off, no food, no water. What did they have access to that made that organizing so grounded in collective solidarity and power? They held hands, you know? What did they have access to that we don't have access to now? I think that's a question that when we look at our organizing in Nigeria, when we look at even the contemporary movement, protests that we've done, we can draw lines to it, but we can also start identifying like gaps where we can start asking ourselves questions. The hashtag and digital activism uprise has also helped in different ways. We've seen different connections. What do we have access to now also that they didn't have back then? It's something that we can also access, but I'm very interested in what they had back then. So if you know how to get to them, please let us know.
Yeah.
How to get to them.
Because now I'm just imagining that woman, assuming, now knowing that we're buying water.
The normalization of that.
Yes, we are buying water. And also, I think one interesting information I came across was that Sawaba Gambo, there was a time she went to Fumilayo and Somkuti to learn about her feminism, her activism. And I'm just thinking about how sometimes we're operating in silos, we're operating in different rooms, just doing our thing, and how we don't take the time to come back and sit together and be like, what is working for you? Come and tell me. Maybe it will work
Yeah.
here. Oh.
I want to think, I want to stay on that question because I want to not blame the siloification caused by the organizing. I want to blame it on the entry of the NGO process. Like I want to, because again, now I'm doing SRHR, you are doing GBV. Like what is gender-based violence? What is sexual and reproductive health and rights? What is, what other things, variations of them? Now it's so separate, so divided that you can't bring everyone together. Even the funding streams are not together. You have to apply if you are doing this kind of work. So I really wanted to just,
Yeah, because it all ties together, and which is actually where I'm coming to. Because when we talk about fund, I love to hear Omolara talk about funding, because first you're going to share some thoughts on feminist movements, some like one or two. Then from there, we'll now go to, because funding is a huge issue. See, it's not even about access to the funds alone, is that when this funding comes, they already have what they want you to do for them, what their idea of liberation is, of the work should be. They are thinking, no, you are saying that maybe people need A, and they're telling you, no, actually, we're funding for B, and we're going to need KPIs, we're going to need this study and that study, fact sheets, numbers, and all of that. So, how is funding shaping feminism?
Oh, lovely.
What are the gains, if any, if at
Yes.
all? And then what are the losses?
So a couple of thoughts on movements. Yeah, so that's why I said a couple. Yeah, so I just want to add to the story of the Aba Women's riots. And, I also am saying this knowing fully well that we always run the risk of these single stories that were told to us. So just to kind of let us know that it's not the full picture, but in a world of slim pickings, we have to hold on to the ancestors we know. And so that is why kind of most of the stories that we tell in terms of the movements in Nigeria revolve around these people. I know a lot of people are doing other research that involve kind of other ancestors who have done these kinds of work. Just to mention that the Aba Women's Riot happened in 1929, but the organizing began in 1925. Yes, it didn't just it wasn't sporadic. It was political education. It was, it was door to door. It was critical consciousness, Mina Salami kind of names that period proto-feminists. That is, people were quacking like feminists and breathing like feminists, but they may not have called themselves feminists. And so these are kind of the stories we get to rely on. And I just wanted to point out the importance of organizing, and I have to say that one of the ethos that we built this work on is that quiet movement building work where, it's more important to us to have a lot of people who are doing their awakening work and living in their own spaces as kind of lights in their own rights, rather than some sort of in institutionalism, sort of, yeah. So I was thinking as you were speaking that movements particularly, the Nigerian movement, the feminist movement that we're talking about, was built on blood, right? Because the Aba women riots, a lot of them were killed during that time. Every other protest that we have experienced in this country, people are murdered by the powers that be. And our movements are built up of all of these wins and losses and pain and suffering and anger. And we are being pushed by neoliberalism to see our pain and suffering as not important, and we are pushed toward sort of posturing, Girl boss feminism is my least favorite kind of feminism. Not because it works in the spaces where it works, yeah. However, what it does is that it excludes all of us who, it excludes all of us who may not operate kind of in those spaces. It's a kind of classed feminism that allows you to talk about the glass ceiling. It's like shattering the glass ceiling, and we know that the glass ceiling is not real. It's indeed a cliff. Because you don't find a woman CEO if the company is not dying and they're looking for somebody to blame, It's like, so these are kind of things. But I wanted to talk about our movements as sort of, as pedagogy, as education, as knowledge. To say that while we talk about the things that have happened, what we need to be deriving from them is not the fantastic. That's why I don't subscribe to many times. I don't talk about the history of feminism, talk about the people. It's like, 10 feminists shaking the day. It's a lovely list. I like it. Like, my friends are there. That's the problem. Yeah. You see some lists and I'm just like, I'm a hater. I hate it, but yay. So you just find out that the work, the labor, the blood, the tears, the suffering is not usually kind of foregrounded. But that is a tradition that we come from, of solidarity, of throwing yourself out there. And sometimes I critique that as well, because I'm like, why do I have to be oppressed, but also fall on the sword, to buy my freedom? It's like, if I die in the process, then how do I get my freedom? So these are kind of the questions I want us to think about, sort of. And, the question you asked, Toby, about what did people who organized in the past have access to that kind of we don't have access to? And that makes me go to the idea that NGOization depoliticized feminism. And we can't blame kind of like, NGOs forever, because that is the reason some of us became aware. It was the places where we didn't feel lost for the first time. It was the places that provided us with the language, with the tools to do this critique work. So this is not some sort of high horse conversation. It is a critical, like, looking at ourselves. Where have we kind of dropped the ball? How can we pick it up? That is kind of the energy of this conversation, to say that the siloing that happened to our work is nothing short of kind of the neoliberal industrial complex. I'm going to kind of take us quickly back to structural adjustments programs in the early 80s. The structural adjustment program was not the first program that was recommended, even though it was enforced, There were other programs, because African governments at the time, believe it or not, we actually kind of had sense, yeah? It was like, there was this nationalist project of, we have now gotten this flag independence, and now we want to build the continent. And a lot of governments, including Tanzania, Tanganyika of the time, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, all of these leaders who were male, because African men sold us to the white men. African men said, come, give us more power, we will give you the women. And then GNC people and everyone who doesn't fit into the colonial binary. So if you are looking for another reason to hate men, that's another one. You can just pen it down in your notes. Because if you look at countries like Zambia, right, the extraction of men into the labor force destabilized kind of relational things. And back to kind of the NGO, because I can kind of get into the whole story of whatever, back into the NGOization, it didn't just silo the work, right? It tied our survival to obedience. It is that you cannot talk about GBV we don't even have agreement on the term. On Monday is GBV, depending on who has the money. On Wednesday, on Wednesday is SGBV, depending on who has the money. On Thursday, it is violence against men and girls, you know? And we survived the he for she season, thank you, God. So, okay.
What was it? Is it gain for him or something ridiculous?
Yeah.
To gain or so, like
Yeah. You know?
he was giving neck and head, really giving neck and head.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are, I imagine it as structural adjustment programs came in the early 80s to destabilize nationalist governance, right? To destabilize the kind of putting one another at the center of rebuilding the continent post-colonialism, right? So structural adjustment programs came in to provide money to the government, but in return, we have to destabilize all of the structures that can make us people in the kind of struggle. So we call these austerity measures, right? Austerity measures provide that you sell, who remembers when they sold Nitel? It was the World Bank that said they should do it. Now, did the World Bank for Gusenu to say it? I don't know. But I mean, the World Bank put something in their tongue to make them do it. You know, but they did put something in their tongue, and that is neocolonialism. That is continued access to resources, to people, to systems, to structures, to ensure that those are captured and the liberatory dreams of this continent will not be realized. So I want to take us from structural, because those kind of like, that's where NGOs came out of, right? We have a report on our website. If you are interested, you can take a look. Where Toby and I wrote that report on agency, on reclaiming agency, and we kind of traced where NGOs came from. It came from the fact that our governments agreed to kick us out of schools, to reduce education, to reduce healthcare. But what did they get in return? You know, monies that came with foreign agendas. When the ginger farmers 3 years ago took those seeds from the government, they thought they were getting fertilizers, but those seeds killed their soils. And a 26 billion naira, $1 billion industry is now zero. You cannot grow ginger in Nigeria currently. I want us to kind of think about the ginger issue a lot. It's on my chest. Because it is a microcosm, it's a window or a small part of the larger conversations that we have, right? Not only have they taken ginger through austerity measures, they also took education from us, and so enlightenment became a privilege, right? And so if you're going to get education, before that, subjugated local ways or indigenous ways, use the word indigenous like super carefully, ways of being, of knowing. If you read The Invention of Women by Ure Koyumi, around chapter 2 to 3, she explains vividly how this was done. The African family structures were Nigerian, let me localize it. The Nigerian family structures were disrupted and destroyed through the boarding house system. So everything we know is a lie. We didn't go to boarding house. We were extracted from home for a certain kind of socializations while our parents were extracted into the labor market. I love to call it the plantation. So it is this destruction of what is coherent. So you see that the NGOization did not happen out of thin air. It is a calculated dislocation of kinship, of love, of care, of renaming us as victims, but also oppressors, of teaching us that we cannot live a good life except we commit class violence, of telling us that the good life is on the other side of whatever we are. That is why, when we think of the questions of worth, the questions of beauty, I talk about aesthetics a lot, not because, I like to wear green shoes and brown shirts. That's part of it. However, I know. The question of aesthetic to me is a question of meaning. It is what conditions convey a certain meaning. And so the structural adjustment programs, I don't believe were just economic. They were also, forgive me, spiritual. They were embodied. They altered what was beautiful about us. Because what do you mean that we don't have hospitals? You know? What do you mean that the government schools are not functioning? I went to a government secondary school, but don't worry, I bought privilege with a few degrees. And so you see that. And then so we're stratified, eh? So before the NGOs came, we were siloed by desire, by access to good life, by access to, by proximity to education, by proximity to whiteness, you know, because somehow we have been told, and I don't know how we accepted it, but I want us to unaccept it, you know, that whiteness is great, is good. We're talking about featureism, yeah? Somebody says somebody has indelicate features. What does that even mean? It is a disruption. I call it a perversion, you know, the Christians get me. It's a perversion. It's not just a subjugation. It is also a perversion of what we think is holy, what we think is beautiful, what we think is honorable. And now we are chasing this unattainable standard of goodness, standard of beauty, of all of those things. And what the NGOization of our liberation did was gather us into small silos, right? So that we can pursue those things and give our obedience for survival. And so, like, I feel like I shouldn't stop there. Thank you.
I think I also wanted to mention that when you look at the structure of organizing back then, these women were market women, trade unions, cooperative, like these were people like normal, ordinary women that just thought this is not right.
Yes.
But when you look at the organizing now, we have to have laptops, we have to have some research done, the compartmentalization.
1 in 3 of
yeah.
And it still boils down to that question you asked. What then did they have that made it?
I want to
that. Okay.
So, feminism is like a movement, right? It's great. We have each other. I was saying the other time that the movement has many issues, but showing up for one another is not really one of those, in my opinion, you know? However, I think one of the things that messed up what women have is kind of a reduction of feminist agitations, for lack of a better word, into some sort of relational, we hate men are not da-da-da-da. You know, so we reduce a hegemony to a relational thing, like, oh, you know, it's because they didn't want me to be the president. Of course, it's a problem, but your issue is not in the moment. Your issue is with a system of power that insists that you must remain in a certain way, and you cannot really change your material kind of reality, your emotional reality, your spiritual, psychosocial knowledge realities, right? So when I think of what those women had access to, I think that it was some sort of understanding that, like Amika Cabral says, that our liberatory agitations is for our material conditions. But when you give 5 of us access to the things, and then 5 of them, aka African, you know, you basically destabilize solidarity by that. So feminism as relational politics is one of the things that weakened kind of like our resolve, our movements. The failure to look at it as a political economy of being, you know, to bring the politics and the money into the same room, to name the power structures that determine what is normal, what is beautiful, what is all of those things. So one of the things that I want us to leave this conversation with is to refocus our minds on feminism as not just a relational ethos or relational political kind of situation, but a resistance to the hegemony of gender, of the performance of gender, of the performance of class, of the performance of like economics. It's like somebody says, you know, free movement of goods and services, right? Let me use ECOWAS as an example. Free movement of goods and services. Who is moving freely? You know, the border traders, they go through, it's just a recognition of the farce that is the systems and structures of the world, and kind of an understanding that while these systems exist, a feminist response is an articulation of the interconnected kind of oppression, right? And how it creates the climate of existing, rather than just, and digital activism has done so much for us, but digital activism also kind of is at the scene of the crime of reducing that to,
Yes.
We are also regurgitating what we've been told.
oh my
Like,
God, American identity politics. Oh, you
By
did
the
it.
way, I just want to add that that guy in France said he's a Pan-African.
Oh, the only Pan-African is
I was shocked.
we
That's
shall not center that person in this conversation.
it's not worthy.
no, we shall not name that guy.
No, I just wanted to like wrap up nitty-bitty what Omolara was saying, because I was thinking about even when, like, you know, when we started in the movement and the campaigns we would write at that time was from like all this Western knowledge and how it was always shaped around, you know, women can do it or you can be president, you can be that knowledge around what feminism is.
Break the class
It is
ceiling.
so relational because that is what if a woman is in a political position, yes, we have women.
Tanzania.
Politics is rubbish.
Tanzania, guys.
So really just identifying how that has even shaped our organizing outside of that NGO. It's so difficult to imagine what is possible outside of that system. There was one time, picking back to the reports that you mentioned, remember when we were interviewing feminists and executive directors of NGOs across the West Africa, and we were talking about, okay, so how did you used to like get funding before, you know, this funding stream started? And they were like, oh, you know, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. Like, all we know is writing proposal and getting funding. And, you know, arguing, it's like survival of the fittest. We have to squeeze ourselves into this small 5% stream that is coming down. And we have to write the reports in a way that fits the...
You discovered activism in your country.
Well, that's still going on, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's so sad.
Yeah.
But I think one of the beauties of Liberation Alliance Africa is how it's kind of like revolutionizing the way we see knowledge. I call it that way because if you've been, by the way, the Human Books thing is still on, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you guys should go check it out. Because for me, it's that I'm seeing that we're moving from saying that Fumilayo Kuti is a first woman to drive a car to actually knowing who she is. That's what we are doing. And I think that's what every one of us should do. Toby asked a very critical question, which I think we should be thinking about. What did they have then that made it that they came together as a collective to organize properly? And what lessons can we learn from that to, you know, fit into our own context currently? And I think that's what's leading to my next question for you both, which you people would give me answers to briefly. Thank you very much. Yes, it is.
Sounds like a
It is. It is. Because because what we're seeing is that there's a collective thinking to it. It's not and I was reading Bernardine Evaristo's manifesto on not giving up, and she was talking about her early days as a feminist and how she was like, no, it's her way or the highway. And then just realizing now, growing into her wisdom and understanding that we have to come together to resist together. And we have to learn from the people who have done it before us. But then we also have new tools. There are ways we can dream now in which they could never have dreamt. So what are the lessons that we can take? But then how do we fit it into a movement that accommodates not us seated in this room that have access to phones and internet, even though it's shitty and empty and it's crazy. Sorry. But to the people in those markets who are selling tomatoes, fighting to find ginger. See, they are mixing a peel of potatoes and calling it ginger at the markets now. I drink a lot of zobo, so I know. And then it's also, what does it look like for a girl who has come out of captivity in Borno?
There's something we say at LA, and Nana, you also know, is that if oppression can take root from the mind, liberation can also spring forth from the mind. And I'm thinking about what that means for a market woman, for it. What does movement look like, not just for everyone within the room? And to me, I think it's just a refuser of the private. You know how I'm thinking about intimate partner violence as a theme, and lately I've just been thinking about how that has really privatized violence. And because a lot of times it's not intimate partner, it's not even the partner, you are not intimate with them, but that term has really, and just that refusal to the private, and understanding that the oppression that we face right now is public, it's structural, it's economic, it's all of those things, but intimate and private, right? And just really understanding that and coming to that consciousness. You know, our role is not simply, we say that a lot, our role is not simply to adapt, but to intervene. But what does intervention look like? We can't just intervene if we are not coming from a place of consciousness. Like, that consciousness raising also is very communal. It is not in silo. The Aba women, you reminded us, they went door to door. That is consciousness raising, knocking and say, have you heard? Did it happen to you? I think capitalism and insecurity and all of these other things that Omolara has grounded us about, the economic impact of structural adjustment programs and all of that bullshit that World Bank has brought in, and how that impacts even our livelihood. The relational side of just having casual conversations and understanding, you know, what's happening here is also happening in my household. This is how we can do it. And it happens because we've heard stories of women gathering money together to provide like support for anyone pregnant in their community, or women buying cane to beat the men that abuse their husband. Like, it's happening in small, small pockets. But I think coming to that point of, you know what, we need to live and interact with this world as though our role is to intervene, is something that I really, really, really dream of. Like, it's one of my dreams, and it's one of the things that we hope that everything that we organize, bright, and where we connect the threads and familiarity, like, oh, they're also taxing my house. Oh, they're also, we have to live in that consciousness. And how many of us are in this room? Being in this room, don't say, oh, I don't know how to. You are already in this room. And I think that you are the foot soldiers of liberation, of consciousness raising. You know, the way we have foot soldiers of patriarchy. Like, considering yourself. We have kids. Wow. Like, when you say you refuse and reject patriarchy, you must also accept your role to intervene. And Paulo Freire in that book was really admonishing us of finding ways of intervention. What does intervention look like? It looks like coming here today, right? And I feel like I don't know how it will become a whole thing. And I don't even care if it becomes a whole thing, really. If it's just everyone in this room, I'm very satisfied. But I feel like before we even think about getting to a big 10,000 women thing, we really need to interrogate, what does critical consciousness mean to us? Where are those sites of wounds that needs healing? Where are those sites of oppression that we can identify within our system, so that they say that, this person is around, don't speak about women, that, like, let it be shocked, right? And refuse to normalize even within yours. And bringing it back to like the end as a movement in organizations, I think, I don't know, because we are all tired. We are all tired. People that are within the NGO space here are tired. And I know that because I've just interacted with everyone, and I know where everyone is coming from, right? We are all tired, and it is in that tiredness that we must find hope. It is in that tiredness, and I don't say it lightly, because hopelessness is one of the credentials of sustaining these systems. But we must find hope. In the tote bag, we have the makings of revolutionary hope. I hope that when you get to your private corners and you read those things and you come to the consciousness also, you see what hope looks like for you. We must find it even within our organizing, like NGO, whatever, within the writing reports, because we have to go back to it. On Monday morning, we are writing reports. It's the thing, it's the norm, because feminists no go chop.
Please, someone needs to cut.
Include, put it, hashtag feminists no go. No, because we have to be realistic. Once we eat, we have to, like Omolara was saying, even though we are trying to move away from the system, unfortunately, we are still embedded in it. Not just even as like in Nigeria, for example, there's no light. Where do you want to dream? That what? Do you get? There's no light. The health care system, like, it's rubbish. There's no security anywhere. These are the issues. And we are not just even saying, oh, market women, arise. Arise where? But we have to, in that tension, in that difficulty, in that we have to find hope. And hope is not, as they will put it, it's not yoga. It's not 10K steps. It is very communal. Sorry to others. It is very communal. It is very, very communal. And we have to find more of ourselves and bring ourselves along the journey. If we need to pause at Ojo Elegba and say, this is where we are stopping today, we need to sit in this bus stop. Let's sit. But we have to pick ourselves up again and keep moving.
Amen.
Because feminists must chop.
You know,
Please, I'm not like getting, yes, they've been saying some awesome stuff, and I feel like a lot of us have been agreeing with it. So I want
this snap your finger.
fingers. Please.
Plan.
Please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. You know, when you said market women, I giggled because I have a question. Why do we think we have anything to teach market women? You know, me, I love the degrees, though, but it makes us crazy. You know, it's like, I spoke to an activist one time who said they want to go to the village to teach women sustainability practices. Me, that I've not been in the village in a long time, I can smell rain 3 hours before it comes. But you want to go and teach people whose entire lives have been living in harmony with the land, right? Sustaining against an exploitative logic, you know? People. So these are kind of the questions that come to me when we think about that. However, can we organize in solidarity with people in different spheres? Absolutely, yes. But I believe that organizing, so I didn't want to repeat what Toby said, because Toby had given some practical things. So I'm going to go this direction. Who knows the saying, the personal is political? Yes, we love to say it. But when the personal is poisonous, what happens to the politics of it? Banange, you guys, the personal is riddled with opportunism, with proximity to whiteness, to proximity to even our local branch of white supremacy, which is the government. You know, it's like you see a new law come up, which I have my theory about laws. It's not my theory, I read it somewhere. It's like when the law is a meaning maker, right? But those laws do not connect with the people. You know, it's like they need a new law at the National Assembly. They go to Singapore and change Singapore to Nigeria. And now that is the law we must obey. So there are foreign bodies in the personal. There are foreign bodies in the political. My dream is that a movement will arise out of a collective hunger, out of a collective anger. Oh, did you see that? I didn't put H in front of my A.
Your ancestors must be ashamed. You have to hunger. What do you mean? You pronounced it like it.
So when I think about kind of the topic, making a case for a feminist revival, it is not about creating new organizations. It's about a careful and patient excavation of colonial writings in our bodies, of expectations, of beliefs, of strongholds that exist in, you spoke about intimate partner violence, Those things are kind of creations of the hegemony, like that tries to make meaning of your lives, right? It is a question of thinking for oneself. I remember a few months ago, I went to do nails in my neighborhood. And then the lady, I think I was on the phone, she said, sorry, can I ask you a question? And I said, what? She said, what's happening in Gaza? I was like, thank you very much for that question. And that became about six of those kind of conversations. So when I go to the nail tech, I would call the auntie that sells the rice, the Indomie lady. Then we'll have like a little meeting, and then I will answer all the questions. So, kilo shele ni Iran by. Then I'll say, I want you want to come out paper straw, but want you bombo. It's like protect the environment and use this paper straw. But they all went to COP because they cannot use, if the neighborhood is too close, it's a problem, but you must fly how many thousands of miles, your private jet, to go and discuss sustainability. Can I just say that they are all liars? Whatever we do, they are all liars. Yes, it's like, sustainability, blah, blah, blah. They went to Kenya last year, maybe 2 years ago, and the entire agenda was climate credits. Exchanging land on the continent for, you're not the biggest producers of this kind of carbon, what are they talking about, but you must relinquish more land. Can I just say that the settler colonialism is ongoing. The fact that we are indigenous to this continent is a miracle. But it's not a miracle that came by accident. It is hundreds and hundreds of years of resistance. But the settler, and I'm a bit paranoid, but the settler occupation is ongoing. I believe that the heaven that they speak of is Africa. They're going to deplete their lives and then come and sit here. And that's why there's AI. Cancel that AI. Delete your cloud. Sorry, maybe don't delete it, but be careful be careful with it. No, because we're looking at Grammarly today, and it says humanize your writing. And I'm like, but a human wrote it. And this is not even like philosophy. I'm just simple question. Grammarly wants to humanize something that's already human. A couple of months ago,
find the bikes at the traffic lights as a human.
If you're a robot,
I should find bikes.
Yes, that's the anger I need. So it's like I was thinking about things like that, like AI, for example. A couple of months ago, I was writing something. I was in a meeting with Toby. We were writing something, and we were actually writing it like together. And then my Google thing flagged and said, "This looks like AI," and I'm like, "Of course." Because you trained your machine to sound like me, right? And so I deleted it and wrote another one because you know what AI doesn't have? But the question is, how do we resuscitate a movement if we are in a state of sleep paralysis? I want to read a quote to us, written by one of us at Liberation Alliance. Mubezi says, sleep paralysis is to those in slumber what consciousness paralysis is to those of us trapped between awareness and action. For many who seek to usher in liberatory worlds, this paralysis is familiar. It feels like being in a dream where you sense something present and threatening, yet cannot move a muscle to free yourself. This arrest of mobility emerges from the tension between the weight of knowing and the uncertainty of how to act. What we're experiencing is a consciousness paralysis that is occurring not because we are not great people, but from what is present and threatening. So how do we free ourselves? I don't have many answers. I only have one. Political education that does not does not position itself as a savior endeavor. A political education that connects our struggles to one another, but also raises questions of complicity inside ourselves. That's how I feel. I think that, there are things that we have been primed to do to others. A question, for example, you cannot talk about Nigerian feminism without talking about the question of class, for example, yeah? Remember that year when we were on Twitter, people were, Nigerian feminists, maybe disgracing us on Twitter, saying, oh yeah, like I'm a feminist, I don't have to do chores. But who is doing the chores? Right? So I always say, when I'm like maybe buying something and I'm prime, like, we are all extracting from different levels, right? You extract me in my email. I go to my neighbor and extract the tomato seller. The tomato seller extracts the girl that they brought from the village to stay with her so that she can go to public school. And then that girl, it's like it is that we need to wake up from the consciousness paralysis that casts us, particularly African women, GNC folks, as perpetual victims, right? And we need to begin to think of how we too might be oppressors, are oppressors. And I'm not saying that cast yourself away, no. It is, I think it's an excavation that I want to happen with a sense of hope, right? Because hope is not linear, like as the world says, hope is not waiting. Hope is like dreaming. It is choosing to carve out spaces within ourselves that is untouchable by the hegemony. It is insisting on the things that make meaning to you, and also being vulnerable and curious enough to release the things that you shouldn't be holding on to. So I think that this revival is a personal awakening. It's an invitation to critical awareness, which includes knowing that we organize with one another. The myth of the middle class has us crazy. As I'm sitting down here, yes, one illness, go fund me, let marry. It's like, oh, help Omolara kick the something. No, because we are conscripted. This woman in Egypt, Muna Eltawe, speaks about being foot soldiers of the patriarchy, right? We are conscripted into protecting. We punish one another on behalf of the government, on behalf of the hegemony. We have to release kind of all of those things so that we can access what is communal about us again. I have notes about individualism, yeah. Individualism that occurs like under a capitalist paradigm where truly, if you don't save yourself, you will find yourself in the gutter. It's not unrealistic to want to save yourself. However, we must return to the ways of being that allow, and it's not a romanticization of the past. Say, oh, they were so perfect. I imagine those movements that we're talking about earlier probably had their own issues. But there is this kind of thing that individualism does to us where, like you were quoting Bernardine Evaristo, talking about their way or the highway, where because we have now learned that 1 in 3 women experience that, and we're like, yeah, according to the World Bank, and then now we are better than everybody else. It is kind of an invitation to understanding that the personal is political, but that's not the end of the work. The personal needs to be nurtured, right? In the way that it should be, so that the communal is not poison to our bodies. Thank you.
Wow. I'm just taking some of those points now, and I think the biggest for me is actually hope. It's actually hope. Because really, where will you dream from if you do not believe or have the hope that things can be different? You cannot imagine, you cannot reimagine, you cannot relearn, you can't do anything if you do not have that hope that things can be different. Another point was refusing to normalize the harm. We must continue to feel that anger, sit in the confusion. We cannot say that, oh well, it's been happening, it's going to continue happening like this. I'm tired. No, we must be angry. We must be the angry Black women. Yes. Be angry. We have to be shocked.
Growing.
And then I think another point is how a lot of it still needs us to go back to thinking decolonially, like going back to understanding how these things have seeped into us and shaped the way we think. And going back to just recalibrating and coming back to ways that are better for us, ways that not accommodate, that reflect our truth, really. And then also political education in not the savior way, because that was, in the solidarity way, not the savior way. Because we cannot come from a place of, oh, I know better, I know how we can do things. We must come from a place of true humility, not the manufactured ones where we say, we stoop to conquer. No, from the one that we know that we need to be in solidarity with one another. And these are all very valid points. And I think you guys have even moved into, because my last question was going to be about how we can move from the personal, where, by the way, you guys had started talking about individualism. So, yes, you must continue, because a lot of it is, like you said, the politics, the personal, they are all intertwined. And if there is a rot in the personal, there is a rot everywhere. But also, we must not look at feminism and movement building as a personal journey anymore. We must think of it as a collective, as that going from house to house, as it's not what I would gain, it's that what we will collectively gain as a people. So how do we move from that as we continue, trying to move into action?
I think, is this the last time I'll talk? So that is very, because I know Damola
Because Damola she has given me paper. She has, we can see what ostrich, well, let's bury our head.
Damola will come to the podium and go on with the work. Anyways, I'm going to utilize my time well. And I just like Omolara has also grounded us well, and you've reflected on all of the things we've been saying. I think community in like understanding that we are not homogeneous, and that if the personnel is poisonous, the politics cannot come out clean. It's not science, it's just really what it is. And consciousness without community is just anxiety with good politics. Like, you just know what's right. But there's something that Omolara mentioned in Yoruba, that one person cannot say, like, you cannot say we have arrived, just one person. All of us, if all of us come out and say we have arrived, it makes more sense than one person saying we have arrived. Our dreaming and imaginations, even when you're dreaming, the shared understanding that I know somebody out there is also dreaming like me, is comforting enough. And I don't think we would get to, in fact, it might not happen in our lifetime. Sorry to y'all. Like, it might not. And because it's so much bigger than just one person, right? And I feel like that redefining what community means for everyone can really set us in a good place. Like, what does community mean for us? What do we need in this political education. Like, especially an example of how, even doing the very basic normal things like nails or hair, seeing it, like, that's where those are sites of intervention, really. You don't have to be invited an old mic and say, when I just came back from Switzerland. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be as ordinary as finding sites of intervention wherever and saying, yes, this is a personal conviction for me. And also really interrogating your personal politics, because you are not contributing to a foreign thing. The politics needs to be aligned. Knowing that, yes, this is the politics and be abiding by it. I think community is one of the ingredients. Like, it's like Omolara celebration is a potluck, right? What are you bringing to the table? Like, this gathering is a potluck to me. Like, all of you looking all gorgeous and nice, and you come with that vibe. Also, having this conversation is because you all look so beautiful, or imagine if you just come here and you are all everywhere. We won't have this decent, peaceful, quiet time that we're having. It's a potluck. If you've not had coffee or tea, like, I'm sleep deprived, but that coffee revived me. It's a potluck, and it has to be as tiny and little and as big also. So when you find those little moments, you don't miss it and say, oh, I have to be on LinkedIn. I'm happy to announce that. It's not that. It's more of all of these other things. And I think within the like the NGO system also, there are threads like that. It's just weaving that fabric together. Weaving it together, because I know people in this room are embedded I am still embedded in the NGO space. I don't want to say I'm out of it, because I still am. Because I'm still writing reports. As flexible as that report is.
And filling time sheets.
Yes. We are still within it. As radical as our own might be, it's not, there's a direct line to the person that is embedded in daily report writing, right? So finding those small sites of intervention would really give us that potluck that we are really, really dreaming of. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To continue from where you stopped, you quoted Bell Hooks saying,
sit down now. She has collected one mic. Why?
So, well, you quoted Bell Hooks earlier about theorize your lived experience. A lot of African scholars, African feminist scholars, actually, much of our African feminist traditions are rooted in kind of theorizing our own lived experiences to build a world of knowledge of the solutions to the problems that are emerging for us, right? So I want to just kind of take us into this neighborhood of thinking around those knowledges that we create. You know why I don't like interacting with kind of it feels I started off too wanting proximity, to do the dance. However, it feels like I am being entertaining when my intention is not to entertain. It's like your anger is cute. We also experience this. This reminds me, to be honest, of some of the work I did when I was at Tears, right? Which was if you go to the station, for example, like the police station, it's like you're talking and everything. It's prayer. You can back me up on this. Or somebody is assaulted, you need to get the police to do their job. It's like you're discussing with them and they're feeling entertained by you, and they're like, and so that. No, anyway, I was getting carried away with the anger of that. It's like, how are we to theorize our lived experiences in a world of epistemic subjugation, where what is intense about us is entertaining, where, blackness is this, let two in the room so that they can... Inclusion. Yeah, inclusion is something interesting. So it's making me think that what is our job in the movement? Like, what is the invitation to us as individuals? It is to build these infrastructures of hope through theorizing, obviously, your life or your lived experience as like theory. I remember we used to have arguments about theory and lived experiences on Twitter. It's like, I don't need to know feminist theory to be a feminist. Absolutely, yes. But also, when the kids come in 50 years and 70 years, what are they going to find about our time here? What does the future look like? You mentioned earlier that we may not be here to witness the liberation in the ways that, it's massive. Because I'm going to live with something. Even if it's small like this, I'm going to live with something. So when we think about that, it's the invitation to build these infrastructures of hope.
Wow.
A moment to ourselves as individuals and collectives to do the work of building these infrastructures of hope through knowledge creation, through listening to one another, through solidarity. And I have in my note here, like, the future, we will not cure the issues of like the reduction or subjugation of African women's knowledges, I think it's correct. Yeah, by individual interventions, but it is the collective building of infrastructures of hope for the future, in engaging in world-making work, where your resistance is not only documented, but also communal. Because your body will remember, other people who experience that will remember, and understanding that our liberation is not a performance. We don't have to look liberated, we just have to feel liberated. And so these are kind of the sites, to talk as somebody who is expected to be so strong, but the opposite is the case, It's like, I have this, because I'm not politically beautiful, I'm supposed to be... No, personally, yes, and communally, not politically. Have you not seen the indelicate features? It is to connect with what is important about us, what is beautiful about us. But not only to live it as personal ethos, but to communicate that to others as well, in little ways, in big ways. It is to reject the othering, the global caste system that puts Black people at the bottom of the ladder and, it gives us all of these kind of hang-ups that we have within ourselves, where we kind of lay ourselves on the altar to be sacrificed for the blah, 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 and all of those good things. So I think that one of the invitations this conversation is laying on my mind is to invite us to a world of kind of epistemic resistance, of writing our things down, of writing that book, not as the first Black person to write a book, but as a world-making experience, as a connection, as a creation of, because we met books here. That's why we are here speaking this English. We read it somewhere, I was reading Bibi's interview, your keynote at Abantu Book Festival the other time. And you were talking about archival fever. And I was, what? Yes. And I was thinking about that as, I know that right now we are all archivists and vinyl DJs. It's wonderful. But can we archive our lives and our experiences and insist that, like my friend TJ Benson said, we will not fade into darkness? Thank you.
Damola, we are rounding up. Thank you very much. But I just want to just re-echo some of the things that they've shared. And the first one is that community is important. It's like it's something we all agree on. We all know the importance of it. And we must run away from the allure of individualism, of being, oh, this person who
Enforcement of individuality.
yes. And I think we're even having a conversation around that earlier. And then we also should try as much as possible to theorize our lived experiences, um, documenting not just our resistance, but I think it's also important to document our joys and the way that we are fulfilled as people, even if that means taking a picture without a filter, you know, just, yeah. Yes. So, in the little ways, in the big ways, we must learn to document our lives and our experiences as, a part of the world making. So I think that's all from us. Though Damola is going to lead the next session where we will just sort of like converse on all we have discussed here. I think that's all from us.
Thank you.
Thank you.